This is Brittney Griner, a professional basketball player in the WNBA since 2013. And for those of you who don't follow the WNBA, which I'm guessing is most of you, you probably never heard of Brittney prior to early 2022, when she made international headlines for her arrest in Russia. What started as a routine trip turned into a massive scandal, culminating in a controversial prisoner exchange. So join me for the story of Brittney Griner's experience in Russian prison. When Brittney arrived in Moscow in February of 2022, she was pulled aside by Russian customs officials for an additional screening. In her bag, they found 2 cartridges for a weed pen. Both of them were nearly empty and contained a total of 0.7 grams of cannabis oil. But since marijuana is completely illegal in Russia, that was all it took for her to get arrested. Brittney later claimed that she had forgotten the cartridges were in her bag. But with how bad her salary is, we can't take drug smuggling off the table. Actually, that salary is the reason that Brittney was there in the first place. She was traveling to Russia during the WNBA offseason to participate in the Russian Women's Basketball Premier League. At this point, she had already been playing for the WNBA's Phoenix Meerkats for 9 seasons. But viewership of the WNBA is just not good. In fact, it's so bad that you probably didn't even notice that I called her team the Phoenix Meerkats when they're actually called the Phoenix Mercury. So players like Brittney often play in Russia to make some extra money. And it's not small money either. In the WNBA, Brittney was making about $200,000 a season, but in Russia she was making over $1 million. Women's basketball is actually more popular than men's basketball in Russia. That's all thanks to a Russian oligarch and KGB spy who married a basketball player and then poured millions of dollars into the promotion of women's basketball before he was mysteriously gunned down in his car. But that's neither here nor there. Brittney was immediately detained and questioned by Russian authorities. 18 hours later, she was handcuffed and sent to a pre-trial detainment facility. It was only 6 days after that, on February 24th, that Russian military forces invaded Ukraine. Meaning that, unfortunately for Brittney, she had chosen the absolute worst possible time to accidentally bring weed into Russia. The invasion obviously damaged Russian relations with the United States, and the countries weren't exactly BFFs to begin with. But now there was no question that the Russian government was going to use Griner as a political pawn. News of Brittney's arrest broke in the United States on March 5th, prompting the Secretary of State to say that she would receive the same assistance from the government as all Americans imprisoned abroad do, which did not bode well for Brittney, considering an American named Mark Fogel was arrested in Russia 6 months prior on the same charge, and the US hadn't even addressed it. On March 17th, Russia announced that they had extended Brittney's detention for another 3 months as they waited for her court case. That same day, US government officials said that they have not had access to Brittney since her arrest. But a source in contact with Brittney's Russian attorneys provided an update on her, saying, "I wouldn't say she's good, but she's okay." Brittney later described her cell in the pretrial detention center as a dimly lit room with corroded walls that, quote, looked like it had been bombed and abandoned. Her room came with a sink and a hole in the ground to use as a toilet, and did not have a shower. So it was pretty much comparable to a Holiday Inn Express. On March 23rd, after Brittney had been in prison for 34 days, US officials were finally able to meet with her. Although they couldn't really do anything except give her a pat on the back and tell her to hang in there. And there was still a barrier between them, so the pat on the back was more figurative. On April 11th, WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert said that the league was doing everything it could to bring Brittney home. Well, there's a load off my mind. Go ahead and cross this one off, US State Department. The WNBA has it under control. In fact, it was only on May 3rd that the US government classified Brittney as wrongfully detained, which was a sign that they were willing to negotiate for her release. Unfortunately, it became clear that the Russian government wasn't willing to begin negotiations until after Brittney's trial. And considering Russia was a little busy at the moment, the trial wasn't happening anytime soon. Still, the public outcry in the United States was only getting louder. When the WNBA season started in May, the league honored Brittney with a decal on every team's court featuring her initials and her number 42, which is a fitting number, since she's basically the Jackie Robinson of getting detained in Russia for the possession of cannabis oil. Understandably at the forefront of the outcry was Brittney's wife, Cherelle Griner. In late May, she did interviews with Good Morning America and ESPN, saying, "There is one person that can go get her, and that's our president. He has that power. You know, I'm just like, why are we not using it? Like, urgently, use it." Needless to say, this did not prompt the president to fly into an active war zone and free one person from a drug charge. Things got worse for the Griners on June 18th, their 4th wedding anniversary. The couple was finally able to set up a call so they could speak for the first time since Brittney's arrest. This was facilitated by the US Embassy in Russia, who was supposed to patch the call through to Sherelle. Unfortunately, nobody answered when Brittney made the call, because the desk at the embassy was unstaffed since it was a Saturday. And those embassy workers were not about to let another couple's problems get in the way of their relaxing weekend. At this point, Brittney had been transferred to a prison known as IK1, where she was sharing a cell with 2 other women. She later described the room as being covered in dirt and black mold. They would sometimes go a whole month without being given toilet paper, and the toothpaste she received had expired in 2007. To make matters worse, it was probably some weird off-brand stuff, not even Crest or Colgate. Brittney was only allowed to shower 2 times a week, and she slept on a thin mattress that was covered in a huge blood stain. Doesn't sound like the best way to get a healthy 8 hours. If only she had the help of this video's sponsor, Manta Sleep. You like how I tied that in? Manta Sleep makes incredibly comfortable sleep masks that are 100% blackout, much like myself after 3 IPAs. The soft eye cups on the masks let you open your eyes while you're wearing them, so if you wake up and forget you have a mask on, your pupils won't be smothered in cloth. And Manta Sleep offers all kinds of unique sleep masks, such as the Manta Pro Sleep Mask, engineered for side sleepers like me. Yes, we're no longer the most persecuted members of society. They also have the Sound Sleep Mask with a built-in Bluetooth speaker, so you can listen to the audio of my videos and lull yourself to sleep with my comforting voice. Not to mention a bunch of other masks that offer all kinds of special features. I tagged some of the masks in this video, so check them out if you're interested. And be sure to use the code GRAINTRAIN for 10% off your order, because you know I always take care of you guys, even when you're sleeping. Thanks a lot to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video. For breakfast in IK1, the prisoners would receive a thick porridge that Brittney described as cement, and for dinner, a little piece of fish that was mostly bones. And I know this prison is designed to be cruel and dehumanizing, but I think they went a little too far by feeding the inmates British food. The guards would constantly harass and belittle Brittney, but some of them would also ask her to sign things for their family. Just goes to show how basketball can bring us all together. Keeping Brittney company in these dark times were her cellmates Elena and Olya, who were paired with her because they both spoke English and could translate for the guards. And while Brittney and Elena became great friends, they eventually realized that Olya had been spying on them and was slipping information about Brittney to the guards in exchange for better treatment. And honestly, if you can't trust the people you meet in a Russian prison, how can you trust anyone? On July 1st, after Brittney had been in prison for over 4 months, her trial finally began. It was then immediately adjourned for another week. When it resumed, Brittney pled guilty to bringing cannabis oil into the country, but maintained it was accidental. Under the Russian legal system, this does not automatically end the trial, because they'll be damned if all these people showed up to court for nothing. So they continued with the proceedings. During the trial, Brittney received support from her Russian basketball team, UMMC Ekaterinburg, as the team's owner and several players appeared as character witnesses. And now is a good time to tell you that UMMC Ekaterinburg is an extremely good team, winning the Russian championship a whopping 13 years in a row from 2008 to 2021. So if you're ever upset about one team dominating a sport, just be glad you're not a fan of any other team in the Russian Women's Basketball League. Brittney's lawyers presented the judge with a note from her doctor recommending she use medical marijuana to treat pain, with Brittney's lawyer saying the permission was issued on behalf of the Arizona Department of Health. And that probably wouldn't even work if the trial was in Arizona. The case came to an end on August 4th, when Brittney was sentenced to 9 years in prison. The typical sentence for cases like this in Russia is around 5 years, but Brittney was found to have intentionally broken the law according to Judge Anna Sotnikova. Bet you thought the judge was gonna be a man, huh? Seems we really do have a long way to go in achieving an equal society. Brittney was also fined 1 million rubles, which is a little less than 17 grand. Just don't expect the WNBA to cover that charge. Following the sentencing, Brittney's attorneys filed an appeal, but it was denied after a hearing that took just half an hour. Luckily for Brittney, prisoner exchange negotiations were underway. At the center of it all was a man named Victor Bout, a weapons manufacturer and international arms dealer. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union, Bout purchased surplus military transport planes from the Russian government and used them to start an air freight business. And while he had plenty of legal cargo, he was also transporting millions of dollars worth of weaponry to numerous countries. He started off making shipments to Afghanistan, but was eventually arming conflicts across Africa and Eastern Europe. His exploits earned him the name the Merchant of Death, which is an objectively cooler nickname than BG. Bout was captured in 2008 when the DEA reached out to him claiming to represent a Colombian rebel group and convinced him to meet with them in Thailand. He was arrested upon arrival and was extradited to the United States in 2010. Extradited by an outspoken Raiders fan, no less. I guess one country he never shipped weapons to was Raider Nation. From the beginning, Russia was attempting to exchange Brittney Griner for Victor Bout. I suppose if there was ever a time where Russia might need an arms dealer, it was then. But the US was attempting to include another prisoner in the exchange, the former US Marine Paul Whelan, who had been serving a 16-year sentence for espionage since 2018. And Russia's refusal to include Whelan or anyone else was stalling the negotiations. Meanwhile, on November 8th, Brittney was transferred to the penal colony IK2, where she was forced to make military uniforms. So someone on the front lines in Ukraine can take solace in knowing that their outfit was stitched by a 10-time WNBA All-Star. IK2 somehow had even worse conditions than the last two prisons. Brittney shared a bedroom with 20 women and shared a bathroom with 50. That consisted of 6 sinks, 4 toilets, and 1 shower for all the women. And the only room on the planet that might smell worse is the bathroom in the men's wing of the prison. There was also no hot water in IK2, and the cold got to be so bad that Brittney's dreads started to freeze, forcing her to cut them off. But Brittney's dreads almost made it to the end of her sentence, because on December 8, 2022, the US and Russia agreed to a prisoner exchange. And the exchange was pretty much just Brittney and Victor, although another American woman imprisoned in Russia was released on the same day. But Paul Whelan and Mark Fogel remained in prison. So according to the exchange, having a little bit of weed is about on par with arming numerous wars. Either way, the two of them were now free. To conduct the prisoner exchange, Brittney and Victor were flown to Abu Dhabi, where their parties met on the tarmac. The prisoners then shook hands and went on their way. Just two criminal masterminds of equal danger acknowledging each other. Victor Bout later said that he wished Brittney luck and that he was shocked to see her without her signature dreads. Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said Russians love their women's basketball. A couple of months after her return to the US, Brittney re-signed with the Phoenix Mercury on a 1-year deal worth $165,000, which was $63,000 less than her previous salary. Nothing worse than getting a pay cut because your bosses think your time in the gulag might have made you a little rusty. Without Brittney's help, UMMC Ekaterinburg ended their 13-year winning streak by losing the 2022 Russian Championship. But they've won the 2 championships since then, so their fans didn't have to suffer for too long. Victor Bout soon returned to his old ways, dealing arms to the Houthis in Yemen. He also became a politician, winning a seat in a regional parliament for the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia. Wow. Oh, never mind. That's the name of their ultra-nationalist right-wing party. That makes more sense. The former Marine Paul Whelan was later freed in a much larger prisoner exchange in August of 2024. But the weed-smoking Mark Fogel is still incarcerated in Russia. Time to pick up a basketball, Mark. Brittney Griner later released a book about her experience called Coming Home. She recently switched teams, going from the Phoenix Mercury to the Atlanta Dream. But that was a deal signed in free agency, which means she's still only been traded once in her career. Now please consider subscribing, or I'll imprison you in a Holiday Inn Express.